I'm going to hand things over to Shirley Halpern, who will interview each of the three business stars who are here. Shirley is executive editor of Variety, and I heard her interview Eddie Q at Polestar. She did a great job, so we really lucky to get her to do triple duty today. So why don't I turn things over to Shirley?
Okay, so I'm going to bring up, I can't move that, it's too heavy. I'm going to bring up Tom Corson.
Is that my cue?
Yeah, that's your cue. Sorry, we wanted you to have walk-on music, but it is the walk-out music. All right.
Baby
Hi,
Rex.
Tom.
Good morning,
Hi,
Cheryl. How you
everyone.
doing?
Hello. So, all right, so everyone here, we have Tom Corson, co-chairman and COO of Warner Brothers Records. It's a position yay! It's a position he took on in January, so congratulations, and also moved to the West Coast with that position. And in case you don't know, among the artists signed to Warner Brothers are Dua Lipa, who I've been singing in my head all day, Lil Pump, Michael Bublé, Josh Groban, Gorillaz, and Bebe Rexha, who we just heard. That was the track Meant to Be, featuring Florida Georgia Line. 1 billion streams, and it reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it didn't leave the top 10 for many, many, many weeks. Is this an out the gate streaming success?
Yeah, it was. But it was actually how it was determined to be the single. It happened before I got to the company, so I'll report what I've been reported to. That it was put out as part of an EP, and we were actually going to chase another song, and this song raised its head, and that's one of the beauties of putting music in the marketplace these days.
What was it about the song?
It's just a copyright, you know, and it raised its hand. It just, all the data started to shift in that direction, and so the label pivoted and just went immediately after this record. And you know, it's a labor of love because other than being country, that's not a pop format sounding song. But it started to react, and many, many months later, not only was it a chart success, but a streaming, you know, juggernaut.
And actually, it sat nicely with a bunch of country pop crossover records that all hit last year. There was like Maren Morris and Zedd, did The Middle. It almost broke open a whole new lane in radio, right?
I think so, and we'll see what happens from there. But again, this is where sort of consumer behavior becomes demand in a sense, and then informs the process of what we do with the gatekeepers of media, and particularly radio. Because 10 years ago, that song wouldn't stand a chance on pop radio.
Huh, so interesting. Well, I wanted to ask you, because you're an operations man, COO, and today's record company has really had to be redefined. What exactly is a record company? So I wanted to just sort of talk to or explain to the audience some of the titles that have changed in the last decade. Like, you used to have a head of sales. Now it might be called
consumption, revenue,
commerce,
etc.
Right. You used to have promotion, used to really mean just radio, and now it means promoting to all platforms.
It depends on the label, but yeah, there's some labels that have merged that title into plugging, DSPs and various things, but essentially it's the same kind of idea. Yeah, we have people that are focused on YouTube. We have people that are focused on different platforms, depending on what we do, and they'll be streaming. There'll be people that engage with streaming, behavior and platforms.
So what are some of those sort of changes that you had to make to the way a record company is traditionally structured or even looked at to accommodate for the streaming time?
Well, it starts with data. You've got to have good data miners and insight specialists that really know where to scrape the data, how to find it, not just on the marketing or promotion side, but obviously on the A&R side. And that's where A&R is done these days. It's done, online, and it's data-driven. There's lots of different software to inform you and different people to get there. And we have people both in A&R and on the commerce side that are engaging with the data and then sharing it. And then we do insight. You can have a lot of data, but if you don't have any analysis, you don't know anything.
And where does gut fit in?
That's important. Look, you can have 5 different acts with very powerful data, and look at it and realize like this one probably, and that's where experience comes in too, and that's where, you know, the people with experience, the sharp A&R people, the smart executives win because they know the difference between, you know, things that are really going to go and things that are going to be really maybe not going to go. And that's where you've got to know how the market is going to adopt things and accept it, not just what the data tells you. But data often wins over gut.
Okay, so I have to ask how you look at signings then, because signings, I don't know if you guys know, are more competitive than ever. And you really can get multi-million-dollar deals by showing that you have a certain amount of activity on SoundCloud, on YouTube, whatnot. You know, if anyone can release their shit on SoundCloud, what do you need a label for? And then what is the kind of artist that a label, a major label, is good for?
Firstly, anyone's always been able to more or less release their music on some level. If they scrape together a few $100, they can put out there, make some tapes, and get their record, and get their music out and get it seen to. But now it faces the consumer, and the consumer talks back. So that's very helpful to everybody. On the other hand, if you have ambition and you want to scale, I would strongly encourage an artist, especially on a global level, to work with a big label, or at least a label that has some resources and some scale. You need an army out there, and that hasn't changed. You need expertise. And you know, yes, there's been some successes with indies, but if you look at it, they're very well funded. And some of these platforms are making a play for creators to come in and be part of their process. But there is label expertise. You can help with A&R, which is an underrated skill. A lot of artists can make their first album very nicely. They have their whole lives to do it. But then to make their second album, or to get access to mixers or producers or writers, if and when they need it, features, we offer that expertise. We offer radio promotion, which is still very, very important. And that's really how records go from, you know, being streamed very broadly to hitting the mass market. There's a lot of people that aren't on streaming services still, that still download and still buy and still consume in that fashion. We have an army around the world. You want to get into Europe and you want to build your touring base. You have to do that behind hits mostly. You know, it's nice to have a touring base in the U.S. You can reach it. It's all on the same landmass. But trying to get to Europe and being connected with the right promoters and the right radio people, you've got to have an army out there doing it. We have every major record label has thousands of people around the world with relationships and with expertise that the artist can leverage. And we have money. We have funds, you know, that we're one of the few parts of the food chain that actually gets out in front and invests in artists. You know, most of it's sweat equity up to that point. Yeah, there are platforms that can put you on there, but if you want to scale and you want to do something on a grand level and build out your brand, we're willing to invest from the jump.
Wow. And, I mean, you mentioned it, streaming is a global business these days. And yes, you can make a record in your bedroom or rent out time here in the village, but then you literally would have to take it town to town, territory to territory. Is the label an accelerator and a sort of global pusher more than anything?
Yeah, we have a record right now by a guy named Dennis Lloyd that sort of hung around for about 15 to 18 months on a global level. And it was signed out of Italy. He's an Israeli guy, signed out of Italy. It's called Nevermind. And it just started to kind of, it was just hanging around, and then a sync happened, and the sync sparked some streaming and sales activity. And then on a mass basis, Warner Music kicked in. The record's just starting to chart right now at top 40. It's number 22 at Alternative. It was just added to Radio 1 in the UK, and you can see the reaction already. If you were trying to do that on your own, it would be very difficult, nay impossible, to make it happen. So there you have an Israeli guy who was signed to an indie in Italy that was picked up by Warner Music Italy and then started to scale outside. You know, it's one of the great stories, and one of the reasons why our food chain and our distribution platform can be super useful to artists.
And actually, the press campaign is fully on, because I was even alerted to him, and it was positioned as a song of summer. So it's interesting that you say that it's 15 months old, but it's really being touted as the song of 2018. So great. I wanted to ask, because hip hop is so much more, it's so popular on streaming. It is the #1 format. Does that change the types of songs that record companies are putting together? Are you thinking we need to be a little urban, almost on everything? You know, like, how is the production of the music changed due to streaming?
We always knew. It's an interesting story, the hip hop story, because before there was streaming and a platform out there to access this audience and free. You'd have YouTube, you've had things like Pandora. We could see that there, especially internationally, there was a hip hop audience that wasn't being served by traditional sales platforms or retail platforms. And then this came along, SoundCloud came along, and the kids involved in it figured out how to unlock those platforms and how to get in and find it. Playlisting and algorithmic stuff started to kick in and seek them out too. But the culture was always there. You'd have acts going over the UK and doing arenas or doing 5,000 seat venues and selling nothing, So it was like, so the culture was there. And now that there's actually the platforms to share that culture and the expertise to do it, it's being served properly, and the consumption behavior is now a really great and growing and super scalable business. So in terms of what we do at A&R, of course, we have to both lead the market and we have to react to the market. So urban is what the consumer wants. We're going to find it and give it to them. And it's a major priority for Warner Brothers Records because we haven't enjoyed a lot of urban success in recent years. And I come from a background where I've enjoyed that genre, enjoyed that culture, and been able to help exploit it. So in the best possible way. So that's our goal at Warner Brothers. But so we're staffing up. We're going to be orienting our culture within our company in that direction. And we're bringing in artists. We have a great deal with OVO. We just signed Wale, and there's a number of other things. We have new breaking acts like Sweetie and Bryce Fine, and we're expecting the world from them.
Yeah, and Tom, I've known you since you worked at Arista, Jay. I didn't know you at Columbia, but I knew you at RCA. So you really have done the major label rounds. And during these last...
I started at Indies.
Right, and IRS, right?
IRS and A&M, yeah.
Yes, and Capital also under there. But today, music and tech are so connected to each other. And as someone who's seen the CD boom give way to downloads, give way to piracy, and now to streaming, and now that you're living here in Southern California, I'm curious what your thoughts are on North and South working together, music and tech, because for a long time, it seemed like there was a giant chasm. There were engineers in the North, and there were entertainment people in the South. And what's happened? What is your view of that?
It's an interesting perspective. I always embraced tech, and I never really understood why our business was so phobic to it. And we lost, and now we won, right? And we'll see where it goes from here. But because we decided historically to just litigate our way through things, and that worked for a long time. And then the genie was out of the bottle, with file sharing and whatnot, and we did our best to kind of put it back in the bottle. But we had to pivot and understand that sort of disruption change was inevitable, and it was the way of the world. And it was very painful, but on the other side, we can see in the last few years how the benefits of tech. And from that standpoint, we joined arms, and we have to move forward together. And obviously, there's going to be some clashing of agendas in that process, and there's deals, rights to be worked out on a constant basis. But I just have always said that if we get our content and our relationships right, we're going to be okay. We'll have to go through the kind of waters and the ebbs and flows of how disruption affects what we do in every creative industry, by the way. I mean, it's no secret, newspapers and books, and everybody's been through it. The film business is going through it, TV. I mean, the massive disruption that's happened in networks. But it's inevitable. So, we've had to refresh our thinking. We've had to get people in who understand it better than the established executives at companies. And we need to continue to do that on a nonstop basis. We have to embrace tech, and tech has to embrace content. I mean, there have been conversations that we've had over the years where, frankly, the naivety of some of the tech people is staggering, and it's right up there with us back in the day, And then so now you can see how they've been pivoting, and they're grabbing content in some of these mergers and acquisitions that are happening, and how the tech companies are pivoting and investing in content. It's heartening in a way. Does it make us nervous in terms of what we're doing as companies? Possibly, yes. On the other hand, we just have to be better. And we just have to evolve and be competitive and be ambitious for what we do and for what our creators do.
Excellent. wanted to know also, just speaking of tech, but technology on a different side. Now that it's so easy to produce music, you literally, you don't even need a room like this. You have a laptop and a pair of speakers and you're good. Has the cost of producing music gone down with the technology becoming cheaper?
Yes, but the deals have gone up.
Okay, explain.
Well, the deals are because it's a robust environment, and you have measurable behavior. And so if you're not just doing it off of gut, and there are artists signed off of gut, I mean, and it should always be that way. There are people who have ears and have the ability to see ahead, and generally are have very high batting averages. But it's so competitive right now. Both if you have creators who can build up demand and do the artist development that's required that record companies used to do pretty much solely, now can happen outside the walls. And then if you want to scale, you come in, and then it gets competitive because the risk of that bet has been diminished by the fact that you can predict out run rates on artists, and you can see through the behavior, whether it's on paid services or on something like a SoundCloud or something like that. You can sort of predict out what you think it's going to be on a certain 3 or 4 different levels and sort of make your bet accordingly. And then it's just a super hyper competitive market right now. When there's 2 people bidding, it's going to go up. When there's 4 or 5, we'll see.
So if you were to get into the music industry right now, where do you stand the chance of making the best living?
I would think management. And promoters seem to be doing okay.
Yeah.
And look, people, I make a great living and I'm very happy with what I make, but it's a risk-reward thing. I have a pretty stable paycheck. On the other hand, I'm only as good as my last year. And so we've always got to continue to move forward. It's a voracious business, it's competitive, it's what we love about it, and it's fun getting in the ring and duking it out, and that's why I'm so happy to be where I am now, because the challenge of taking Warner Brothers to a new and greater place is something I just couldn't pass up.
I'm going to throw one more at you. I recently interviewed John Janik, and he said, you can read a record in 72 hours. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think mostly. It's fair enough. You can have a read, I wouldn't, in most cases, make a judgment, a definitive judgment. I prefer to think of it more as a 2 to 3 week process, and we are always open to being surprised. And it depends on the drivers, because what are you reading that record from? And if John's talking about just reading an unsigned act, I don't think that's accurate. If you're talking about, you put out a song and you're trying to evaluate whether it's got potency to go all the way like meant to be or New Rules or something like that, that sounds pretty quick, but you can certainly get a sense of whether you have something or not, and probably more than you don't.
Right.
And if you, like we'll put out a few tracks sometimes and we'll look at them and we think it's this one, Meant to Be is an example of that, and it turned out to be that one.
Right.
And so that's where it's very informative. When I make that decision that's going to involve hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment or millions of dollars after that, I might want a few more days to do that. But yeah, that's fairly accurate.
And sorry if you didn't know, John Janik runs Interscope Records. Okay, well, last question here, and then we'll open it up to the audience. What issues do you think are important for researchers to study right now?
Predictability, KPIs that can really inform our business practices, things that define the user experience that we can learn from, because at the end of the day, the consumer and the user are what it's all about. Other things that help artists, define who they help them define kind of what's working, what's not working for them. Because artists evolve, they don't make the same record twice. If they do, it's probably not the best thing. And then things that, when you touched on technology and how it can inform us, stuff that we can look at and give us choices. Give us the opportunity to digest what you can research and look into and say, hey, that might inform you moving forward. I'm a big data geek. I always have been. I've always worked for people that were really into data, and we're really into refining and grabbing information and direction from that data And it's always served us well. Data is the foundation that allows you to be creative, right? And allows you to make decisions that are responsible. You shouldn't be a slave to it, but more and more and more, it's proving to be pretty accurate. So that, I think, along those lines, what can help us just really be more creative and really define our businesses and really inform us with respect to what our users are doing.
Perfect. Yes, Alan.
First of all, thanks for joining us.
Lovely to be here.
One of the goals of this group is to analyze data to bring more transparency to the user industry. So one question I have for you to think about is, are there ways in which researchers, independent researchers, might be able to access data, because some of the publicly available, a lot of it is not. I'll circle back to that in a moment. The conventional wisdom is that 1 in 10, 2 in 10 artists who are signed cover the costs, and the others don't. Has that changed now that you can do Moneyball to music and then look at data?
Yeah, it's gotten a little bit better. The deals have gotten so expensive lately that that's proving to once again be challenging if you're just looking at it on a P&L basis. But it does give you a little more comfort that maybe you can get up to 2.5 or 3 out of 10. And then there's a longer tail. You know, it's the first week. You used to be able to recover a lot of your investment in the first week on a successful project. That, you know, the highs aren't as high anymore because you know, streaming is not a first week behavior in the sense that, and the revenue is not a first week, you know, grab. So from that standpoint, it's not quite as easy on that, since you have to hope that you have the tail on things. But yeah, I think generally it's gotten a bit better, and we're better run companies now than we used to be.
Anyone else? Questions in the audience? Yes.
I also echo the thank you. I'm really interested about, you gave reasons why artists would want to be on major labels, but which kinds of artists would major labels want to have? And so the corollary of that is, are there kinds of artists that majors used to be investing in and now are not?
Kinds of artists and genres have proven to be less lucrative. Rock, there's no secret, rock is under siege in terms of what's going on in the streaming world, mainly because the platforms are focused on younger consumers and users. For obvious reasons, it's easy to explain the technology to them, and they're doing it anyway. So you just migrate them over to a paid platform. Hard to do, but successful now. And so those kids don't seem to be that interested in guitar-driven rock music and things like that, which pains all of us greatly. But we do believe it'll come around, and music morphs, and that's where we're expecting, you know. And you can hear it in the music that's on, like alternative radio now. It's less guitar-driven, more beat and electronic-driven. So, but no, I you know, we're always looking. If we're doing our jobs, we're always looking for what's next. You know, yes, you have to deal in the moment, but it's our job is to anticipate the market. And if we get into a situation as supporters of creators that we're just reflecting the market, we're going to get beaten. And that's where the indie sector has proven to be pretty potent these days. They're moving quickly, and they're disparate. But you know, there's a lot of smart kids out there that are natives to all this behavior, and so we need to make sure that we have an open path to, you know, an open door to them, and a path to scale and support that.
With so much data, there's new companies that have come out to be investment pools in production and in new artists. The film industry for a long time has used other people's money to be helping build their inventory. Has any of this new money or new money with data been attractive for you guys to be parlaying that for investment in new artists?
Yes. I'm learning the Warner Music Group because I've been there 5 months, but I just recently came back from a conference where I was very much excited about some of the business partners that we're in business with and going to be in business with. And they'll reflect some of what you're talking about, and it's not just music, it's content. And one of the topics was how do we better integrate with those services or those businesses that we either have a formal or informal relationship with. And if I'm answering your question the right way. I think I've gotten off track here a little bit. But the idea in mind that we can use not just music business stuff, but because we're in the content business in the game, and our partners in the artist world, they're not one-dimensional artists anymore. They're multi-dimensional. And so we need to help them and have both internal and external relationships where we can leverage our value propositions. So does that answer the question, or did I get off
It
track?
takes it in a great other direction, so that's fabulous. Thank you.
Well, also Len Blavatnik, who owns Warner Music Group, he is one of the top investors in the world.
Absolutely.
His portfolio is very diverse, so in that sense, there is money coming.
Yeah, it's one of the things that really attracted me to Warner Music was that it was very entrepreneurial, and there's a lot of proof of it now. You've got to acquire things, then you have to figure out how to make it all work, and we're in the process of doing that very nicely.
Yes.
Thank you for coming as well. I have a question when you talk about predictability. There's so many different factors to predict in music. What's like a tangible example of a really useful prediction, whether it's for a new artist or for a song by an established artist that's been actually useful to help the artist? And it's a good example of that.
Yeah, there's several. If you look at stuff that's on like Spotify collection, users collecting a song into their playlist, that shows engagement. Social activity, we have a fan engagement department, not a digital marketing department. I loved that when I arrived. I thought, because I've been searching for a new title at my other place for a while, and I got there, and a woman who runs it is so brilliant, and she comes from an agency background. She said, no, we're going to call this fan engagement. I thought, fantastic, that's so smart, and so on point. And so we'll measure, we have certain measures of fan engagement. They're indexed against other like artists and across music, and then you get into just the basics of of comps. I'm big on comps. I hate that strong word. I get uptight when I just get raw data, and I'm like, well, what does it mean? I want analysis. I want to know if you tell me this is 2% of that. Is that against that genre or like artist, is that good? Is it usually indexed at 1 or 1.5 or whatever? So, and that's happened across the industry. Some have more rigor to it than others, but those are just some sort of examples or KPIs that we try to look at. And there's loads of them, depending on what you're looking at and why, whether it's brand new artists. And there was an artist that came out of the East that's now being chased by every label. Our guy found it when it had 5 plays on SoundCloud. I don't know how, I don't know why, I just know we got to give the guy a raise. So, and the kid is great. So that is, and that was gut too though, because he looked at it and he said, wow, I don't know if this is going to react necessarily, but this is great. And then within a week it had reacted and been added to local stations. So, that's the fun part about what we do.
All right, I think we have to wrap up, go to our next keynote.
Time for an
Tom,
upgrade.
thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, everybody.
All right, I'm going to welcome up to the stage Don Passman. Hi, Don. Good morning.
Morning.
Assembled audience. Bye, guys. Bye, Israel. Donald Passman just recently became a name partner in his law firm. So in our program where it says Gang, Tire, Raymer, Brown, it is now Gang, Tire, Raymer, Brown, and Passman. Congratulations. Of course, he made his name as the guy who wrote the book on the music industry. Kind of needs no introduction because everyone uses it. It's our Bible. It's called All You Need to Know About the Music Business. 9 editions currently?
Yes, working on the 10th.
Working on the 10th. Okay, so because Don has written now 9 different versions of everything you need to know to operate in this very complex industry, I thought I'd just give him the floor so he could at least talk to us initially about, the massive changes that you've seen. Because I'm sure even between editions 7 and 8 to 9, there are tectonic shifts that have happened in the music industry. So tell us.
Okay, actually, the most tectonic shift is happening right now. And I figured you guys would like some numbers, so we'll start with that. In 1999, the United States recorded music industry was about a $15.5 billion industry. Since 2010, it hovered around 7 billion, less than half. It had drifted down over that time and just sort of stayed flat. The first up year since 1999 was 2016. So for 17 years, it just muddled along in that area. And but in 2016, it had 11.4% growth, and then in 2017, it had a 16.5% growth, but it's still at 8.7 billion, meaning that even with all that, it's barely a bit over half of what it was in the heyday. And the reason that it's going up is why? Streaming, of course. Streaming in the U.S., less foreign for reasons that CDs are strangely still big in a few key markets, was about 65% of the business. That's huge. What do you think is the next? What do you think is bigger, CDs or downloads? CDs, why? Because of the streaming? Well, you're right, it is CDs. CDs are about 17%, downloads are 15%. The reason is that the people who are technologically savvy enough to get on and get music digitally were the ones that were abandoning download in favor of streaming, but the CD buyers are still plodding along thinking that's a new technology. The rest of the business was vinyl, which is a huge growing part of the business, held back only by the fact that every vinyl factory in the world is working 24-hour shifts, but it's 2 or 3% of the business. It's nothing major. So what does all this mean in terms of day-to-day and in terms of how the industry actually works? Well, from the beginning of the music industry, back when there were wax cylinders and piano rolls and sheet music, music was monetized by selling something. It's been that way up until very recently. The streaming is a massive game change, and it's much more massive than it might seem at first blush. And the reason I say that is that I could go to a record store and I could buy multiple CDs, no problem, right? But if I'm listening to something, I can only listen to one thing at a time, right? So if I'm listening to your music, I can't be listening to somebody else's. That was never true in the CD days. In theory, people who bought my CD were unlimited, and people who bought your CD were unlimited, and it had nothing to do with each other. Well, now we're dealing with competition for ears. And the reason I say that is, let me give you a moment about how it's monetized. It's monetized in the streaming world unlike the sale model. It's monetized by taking all the revenue, whether it's ad-supported or paid subscriptions, putting it into a pot. Then you look at how many streams happened that month, right? And then out of that number of streams, whatever ratio your streams were, that percentage goes to your record label and then gets split between the record label and the artist. So that means there's a finite pool of money. Not, in theory, the ability to have an infinite pool of multiple consumers buying different genres or buying the same album of 2 different artists. So now we're in a competition of what's basically a zero-sum game. For the first time, what I get takes away from what you get. And so it's a really different competitive environment. And it's the kind of thing that we're still adapting to, and it's still trying to figure out how to make it work. So that's kind